What's going on, everybody? You guys know me, Klepcx here. We are CritiX.com, and I'm here with a very, very special guest. You guys know him from projects like Dead Zone, The Breakfast Club, the list goes on. Weird Science, The Goldbergs, and now he's going to be starring in this brand new film called The Class. I'm here with none other than Anthony Michael Hall. How are you doing, brother? How are you?
That's great, man. Good to be with you, man. Thank you for the intro.
And I even know you're a Boston native. I'm in Massachusetts myself. That's where I'm from. I didn't know you were a Boston native.
Are you?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
am.
yeah.
Yeah, I was born in West Roxbury. Yeah, near Dedham. Actually, Women's Brigham's Hospital in Boston. But yeah, all of my relatives are from Boston, man. A lot of them, absolutely.
That's
Awesome. That's awesome. So I want to get right into it.
Yeah.
I want to ask you because I know you've said in the past that you've met with John Hughes in later years, and he mentioned something about a sequel possibly to The Breakfast Club. And I know nowadays people are like, don't touch it. It's a classic. So what inspired you
Yeah.
when you read this script to say, you know what, this is the story that I need to come back for?
That's great. Well, that triggers two stories, and I'll start with the class. I was basically introduced to Nick through a mutual friend, and Nikki Solozzi, our writer director. And I got to tell you, Clep, I was just really taken by surprise. I thought the guy wrote a fantastic screenplay. And I think in keeping with a modern audience of young millennials, he made it really strong. Like, in other words, all the characters have really strong personal issues and conflicts. And in a similar way, it's an homage, obviously, right? It's not a remake of The Breakfast Club, but it's inspired by. In this case, we have six kids instead of five, but they're all dealing with real world issues, whether it's alcoholism or drugs or someone is dealing with cancer. I mean, there's a lot of issues of sexuality. There's a lot of things that I thought made it very contemporary and very strong. And our cast really delivered. We had a great young cast of actors, and they just did a really impressive job. Going back to your first question, it was something that came up years ago. Unfortunately, the last time I ever spoke to John Hughes, he called me, Clep, with John Candy on the phone. And it was a trip because we wound up hanging out on the phone for like 2 hours and talking. And it was at that point, Clep, that John mentioned to me that the idea that he was kicking around in his head, if we did a sequel to The Breakfast Club, how would we pick up with them as adults in their 30s or 40s? So I know that it was in his heart. It was something that he was playing with the idea of doing. And then all these years later, again, not anticipating it, never thinking I would do a film inspired by one of my own films, I meet Nicky Solozzi, and he did a beautiful job with the script, man. He gave all these characters a real humanity. They're dealing with real world issues, and all these young actors really delivered, man. They brought the goods. They did a great job.
Yeah, I think they did too. And you did as well. You play a character by the name of Falk, who's now roles reverse for you. You're more of the more cynical, disciplinary adult, similar to Vernon. Talk to me about him, about that character, and because there are differences. There are similarities, but there are a lot of differences because of the time. Talk to me about his character, and in your words, who is he?
Question, man. It is. Well, first of all, props to Paul Gleason. He was a great guy. He became a great friend. Who's the man who played Vernon, and fortunately, he passed. And I was telling another journalist earlier this morning on one of the other interviews that when I was a kid, we were auditioning on The Breakfast Club. John brought in two actors that were down to the wire, and it was going to be the gentleman that played Coach on Cheers. He was an older actor, and then I had seen Trading Places. And I remember cracking up when I saw Paul Gleason in Trading Places because he played this kind of mean FBI agent. And there's one scene where he's on a payphone back in the day when there were payphones, right? And there's an old lady waiting for the payphone, right? And he looks at her and goes, fuck off. I mean, sorry, we have to bleep that later, but it was just hilarious. So I brought that to John Hughes's attention. Next thing you know, he brought Paul Gleason into the mix and he auditioned for it. And the rest was history. He got the part. So to answer your question, a lot of it, it was always a wink to Paul, because I wanted to kind of do some things that were inspired by Paul. And he played that great. But like you said, the character is different. And the way that he's different is also true for Debbie Gibson's characters, that there's more of a humanity shown in them. They relate to the kids and they go full circle from trying to be the administrators and the teachers and the so-called adults to really being struck and hit with the emotions and the realities of what they're all dealing with. So there's a nice turn at the end of our movie where you see that in them, because even Debbie comes forth and she shares her background, her history of her troubled childhood, And then with my character Falk, it was no accident that that name was supposed to sound like what it sounded like. Because he's kind of a tough ass and he's kind of a tough, principal type. And their
Yeah.
conflict is interesting too, because he tells her to, stop trying to be their friend, just be their teacher. So he
Yeah.
goes from this role where he's kind of like Paul Gleason, right? But then at the end, you'll see there's a nice turn where he makes too, where you get the sense that, well, maybe this guy kind of got stuck. He had other aspirations too. He wanted to be a musician, but ultimately he maybe kind of got stuck in his town being a teacher. But again, there's a nice humanity that's shown in both of our roles.
And it takes it kind of full circle, which is cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also you get to work with another old friend, John Capellos. Um,
Yeah.
what was it like, seeing him? Like, I don't know if you guys have worked together before, but last time I saw you guys together, you shared a great scene in Weird Science, and now you guys are like,
Yeah. Well, what's interesting? We share this weird, little known fact. Probably we were the first two actors that were in all three of John Hughes' first films. So he was also in 16 Candles. He played the groomsman of Molly's sister. Molly's sister, her husband to be. He
yeah,
was hilarious in that. Breakfast Club and
mhm,
Weird Science, like you said. So it was great, And I remember reaching out to John about the project. He too had read it. He loved it. He thought the script was really strong, and we were really excited to have him come back into the mix because he's another great actor and he's an old friend, but he also has those chops with comedy. He's great too. So he did a really nice job. He plays Charlie's uncle in the film, Charlie Gillespie's
yeah.
uncle, and he did a great job. And it's really more of a dramatic turn for him, as you saw. But great guy and a Chicago.
Great guy and a Chicago guy too. It was cool for him to come out and join us.
Yeah, that's a powerful scene towards the end there. And with that being said, in my review, I strongly feel as though it's not the Breakfast Club. It has homage to it, as you said, but it's not the Breakfast Club. There are a lot of similarities, but there is a a lot more hard hitting topics that I think in this one that we probably couldn't talk about back in those days. So I want to ask you, what did you learn about adolescence today versus what you had to deal with back then? You see any differences or similarities?
I definitely do.
Honest to God, I mean it. I'm with you. I think that there's a lot of parallels and similarities, and at the same time, it's a much rougher world to grow up in between the internet, social issues. And I think that Nikki did a great job kind of giving all these issues to the kids. So they had great conflict and great characters to work from. They're all flawed. One of them is dealing with having cancer, one of them is dealing with alcoholism, one of them is dealing with their anger. There's a lot of really, one of them is dealing with their sexuality. So as you said, there's a lot of hard-hitting topics that he was able to kind of overlay all those sort of modern day real issues and give them to those characters, which made it very compelling and strong. And so I'm really glad that you saw that and that you appreciated that, Club, because I felt the same way. That's what struck me about the script too. I'm like, wow, this is not the Breakfast Club. This is something different. It's six kids instead of five, but they're dealing with real world issues. And then they collide in a similar way. So it's like taking the structure of the Breakfast Club and really kind of strengthening it with modern day real world stuff. And I think that that really made it click, made it work.
Yeah, there's almost like a moment in that thing where it feels like that room is about to erupt. It's so emotional at some points. Outside of just the project itself, I know you met these kids and they're very charming on screen. Was there any advice that you gave them, or vice versa, that you pass along that they could take somewhere with them? Was there any moments where you sat them down and
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The one thing that there wasn't any real exact moment of that per se, but it was really more of something that I extended to Nikki, which is I told him something that John Hughes did with us, which was he would carve out a week, sometimes 2 weeks. I think on the Breakfast Club we had about 2 weeks of rehearsal. And that period of time was really instrumental and very helpful because in a very organic way, the kids got to know each other. We would have read throughs and all, we would do the typical stuff, fittings for the wardrobe and all the things that we had to do. But the time that we spent together talking about the material, working on the scenes, rehearsing it, and then that led to them really connecting in a very organic way that surprised everybody because it transcended even what we were doing years ago. Because back in the day, Judd and Emilio and Allie, for example, were in their early 20s. Molly and I were actually 16. So we would be shuttled off to the teacher and be doing our homework. And then Judd and Emilio would go out and have a beer at night because they were grown men, right? In this, it was different. They were also all out of high school, but they were all in their early 20s, playing a little bit younger. But they really vibed. They really got together and they really united and bonded in a way that was very organic. They started hanging out, going to amusement parks, going to the gym together, eating at night after we even wrap. So it was really a cool thing where that just happened naturally. So kind of overlaying that process of carving out the time for rehearsal, create all these nice opportunities where they really bonded as friends, and they became friends by the end of the film, which was cool because we didn't expect that. You know, we thought they'd all be working well together. We hoped, you know.
Yeah.
And they really bonded. They really did. It was cool, and it fed the work, man. It just makes it better.
Yeah. You all look like you had a really great time bonding on that film. And I want to ask you just my last question and let you get out of here. You've done it all. I mean, you've been a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You've been a part of DC. You've done voiceovers. You've been on television. You've had your long-running show, Dead Zone. Like, what is left for Anthony Michael Hall to do? What's on your list? Are you even interested in revisiting anything that you've done in the past?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that very much. Thank you for what you said. That's a nice compliment. You know, I'm always just looking to improve. You know, it's always, I feel like a year round mindset of just wanting to better myself, do better work, keep growing. You know, as a producer, I want to start directing as well. Through my company, Manhattan Films, I'm producing films. I'm doing two more this year. One is called Roswell Delirium, which we're in production on now. But as an actor, I feel very blessed that I've had this long career. And at the same time, I feel kind of fearless. You know, like I love going to do comedy, and I love switching it up and doing dramatic work too. So I would say just more good work and more great collaborators. You know, just to work with great teams, because that's always what it's about too. You're as good as your last team, right? So you really want to collaborate and open up. And I'm just looking forward to the next bunch of years. You know, here I am at 54, but I'm looking forward, man. Looking forward, man.
And is there anything that you've done in the past that you wouldn't mind revisiting, similar to what you've done right now? Like, and it's there's a lot of
You know what?
spin-offs and things happening.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I loved because I was a part of his universe was watching John direct. So, for example, directing comedies would be one of them. You know, youth comedies would be great. I would love to do that because I had one of the greatest mentors ever. And one of the things I mentioned earlier to one of the other journalists is this idea of, I don't know where it comes from in literature, but the idea that we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. We all had mentors, great parents, great teachers, great associates, people that mentored you and helped raise you in whatever your business is. So I feel great debt to those people, you know, whether it's Harold Ramis or Maddie Simmons, or Warren Michaels or John Hughes, or, you know, so that's something I'm excited about. Directing in the future and directing comedies would be great. And as an actor, we'll see where the road takes us. You know, I'm just very blessed to be doing something creative all my life. I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, you've been great at it, man, and I appreciate you. I've always been a fan. I want to thank you for talking with me. Everybody, check it out. The Class. It's everywhere. Well, select theaters and everywhere on digital September 9th. Make sure you guys check it out. Thank you, Anthony.
Clef, thanks a lot, man. Great talking with you, man.
No problem.
All the best.
Me too.
All right, man.